we thought we'd give it a crack, try and buy our first horse and see if we can get some other people to come in with it. It was really just sort of was born out of that. We're very lucky. The first horse we bought has been very successful for us. Nikki's Gold. We actually sold her last week at the Magic Millions broodmare sale and did very well. We got $280,000 for her. She cost us $25,000 and she won $400,000 in prize money. I mean, she was a dream. So off the back of her, we gained a bit of success. The following year, we bought another one. The following year, we bought another one. And then since then, we've been buying, we bought 2 last year and 3 this year. And so far, they've been very successful for us.
Yeah, especially being such a young syndication. It's good to have those first horses that you purchase be really strong horses, and City Class really gets the syndication out there. What about you, Adrian? Have you got any kick-off stories for your syndication? Of course, we know Turbo was one of your fantastic horses.
Yeah, well, I actually do. The first couple of horses I bought both ended up winning in town. So one of them, her name was Misspoken from memory. I paid $20,000 for her. She was a Stratum filly. She won on a Saturday at Warwick Farm. And another little filly, I'm trying to remember her name, Shady Favour. She was by Dane Shadow. So that was, I think, going 12 years back now. We paid $30,000 for her and she won at Rose Hill. So that definitely helped. You know, you go out and you spend $50,000 on 2 horses and they both win on a Saturday. And look, I was actually in the food industry before this, so chalk and cheese. I owned cafes and restaurants, and kind of like Graham alluded to, it began with just owning small little shares. And I decided to give it a go, buy a couple, and they were the first couple of horses I bought. And then after a year or two, it got to a point where I had to make a decision. You know, do I continue on my road in the food service industry, or do I give syndications a good crack? So that's how it all started for me.
Yeah, well, you've certainly swung the right direction, I think. Can't get better than horse syndication. Would you be able to tell us, both of you, where you were based, Adrian?
Parramatta. So we're not far away from like Graham, we use Gary Portelli. So pretty central. You know, I'm 15 minutes away from the stable, 15 minutes away from Warwick Farm, 15 minutes away from Rose Hill. It's all happening out here at Parramatta now. It's a hub for a lot of business. You know, a lot of you know, in the past you'd hear of people being based out in town in the city, but you know, out here at Parramatta, you're just so close to everything. So I'm based out here out in the west.
And you, Graham?
Justin, we're down in the Sutherland Shire, but it's still not that far from Warwick Farm. We can get over there in about 40 minutes. The reason we're with Gary Portelli was he trained the first horse that we were in together, and we just sort of gained a bit of a rapport with him. He's a very good communicator, a very good trainer. He's very open to ideas and supports us all the way. So it was a no-brainer when we decided to get into the syndication business that we would go with him. And at the moment, that's, well, we do have one other trainer. We have Gaynor Williams out at Bathurst. We have one horse with her, mainly because we found she wasn't really competitive in the city, and she was running around in the bush. So to make things a bit cheaper for her owners, we took her out to Gaynor. But all our other horses are with Gary at the moment. So, and you know, we're been very successful with him. So the old saying, if it's not broke, why fix it?
Yeah, exactly right. What about when you're at the yearling sales? Is there a particular type that you're looking for? Like Adrian, I know you've got a lot of chestnuts listed with us, and Graham, are you looking for the next Nicky's Gold?
Well, I'm sort of fortunate enough that, well, again, like Graham, I have my horses trained with Gary. It's been like that for 12 years now. I think we're fortunate enough to have a lot of good syndicators around. There's a lot of people that do a really great job, but for me, it was just a matter of engaging Gary and giving him a vested interest in our business and what we do. So knowing that everything we buy is going to walk down his driveway, basically you won't see, whenever you see Gary, you're going to see me, and vice versa. We're out the sales together. So essentially, what we're both looking for is an athlete. I don't care what colour they are. I don't care, what sort of stud. I mean, it's always good they come from a good stud. The stud's got a good reputation. But in essence, you're looking for an athlete. I don't think they're any different to comparing a football player to a guy that sits on the couch at home. Essentially, you want to buy an athlete. So that's first and foremost, before pedigree, before anything, is I've picked everything up from Gary, having bought Yearlings next to him for over a decade now. You're looking for an athlete. You don't want to spend. I don't think you have to spend too much money to buy a nice horse. I think the challenge is that it's easy to go out and find a nice type for $200,000 and $300,000. I think there's a lot of people that can do that, but when you're walking into a sale and you're trying to spend 50, 60, 70, 100,000, and you try and pick the eyes out of the sale and your success flows through that. I think that's what constitutes a good judge, and I'm very lucky to have Gary's eyes. I can pretend I know as much as I know, but never at one point or at any point would I know more than my trainer. So I kind of follow his lead. I won't buy anything unless he wants it in his stable, and it just all comes back to buying an athlete at the end of the day.
What about you, Graham? Are you looking at the physical aspect of the horse, or are you looking more at the pedigree side of things?
Well, I'll agree with Adrian as far as the athlete goes, but we have certain criteria that is probably unique to us. For example, we only buy fillies. So first and foremost, we go through the catalogue, and we can basically cut it in half because we don't look at the colts. We just buy fillies. So the day the catalogue goes online, that's the day we start work. So the three of us get it. We go over it with a fine-tooth comb. We find the types we want. We know the size we want. As Adrian said, we know we can't buy a Snitzel. We know we can't buy an I'm Invincible, because if they're in the price range that we're looking at, generally there's something wrong with them, So we just take those out. We know the size we're after. We like those bread and butter size, like Nakoni. When I speak of I'm Invincible, we actually identified I'm Invincible at the first sale that when we first started, but we're probably one sale too late for him. We're the underbidders on a good one that ended up in Melbourne. Yearling Investments bought it, but they got it. They just went higher than we were prepared to go. So from that sale on, the I'm Invincibles became out of our reach. As I say, so we like the Nakonis. We like a certain size that we know we can afford. Then we look at the dams. We're really concentrate on what the dam's done, what the grand dam's done, and what the third dam's done. If they've produced a lot of winners, we're interested, because we like to know. We're not too concerned whether the dam's raced or not, but we like to know that she's produced a horse that can gallop. But so we go through all that, but the last thing we do is we get Gary to inspect them, and that's when I'll agree with Adrian. We're looking at athletes. We could have our number one pick, and if Gary puts a line through it, so be it. It just goes in the bin. So there's no way. What we're looking at is everything we want and something Gary likes as well. And that's when we pick the one that we bid on.
Yeah, it's good to hear. Working with your trainers, it's the main thing. How you were speaking about that you're particularly looking at fillies. Graham, I'll ask you, what is a standout filly? And after that, Adrian, what do you call a standout colt?
Well, the standout filly is just one that that ticks all the boxes for us. So, as I said, it's one that comes from a good family, one that's hopefully got some siblings that have raced and won races, and the athletes. So, yeah, I don't think there's any difference in what we're looking for. If we're looking for colts, we'd be looking for the same thing. But we only look at fillies. We've got our reasons for that, and we just tick all the boxes. And as I said, Gary has the last say.
And Adrian, from a physical point of view of the horse, what exactly are you looking for in a super strong colt, or a colt that you value a lot higher than others?
I think they've just got to have everything in the right place. And again, this is where, you know, there's a difference between a nice colt that everyone can identify and sort of one that you can project that will look the part in 6 months' time, because you'd be amazed at what a few months in the paddock can do. I don't mind buying colts or fillies that are a little physically behind. My best horses have been like that. You know, I think you have to have the foresight to sort of get a gauge on what they're going to look like in 3, 6, 12 months' time. Because let's face it, you go into a yearling sale, you're not putting your saddle on them tomorrow. They're not going to the track tomorrow. I can distinctly remember horses like Lightstra Turbo. He looked like a foal, and he was at a mid-year sale, much like the very sale that's going on at the moment at the Magic Millions. And he was a late foal. He looked like he was just so backward and behind, but he just had everything in the right place. You know, you could see that he was going to grow into a nice horse. Had he been that big, forward, strong colt that most people can identify, we would have paid $245,000 for him rather than $45,000. You know, so it's hard to put it all into one box, but essentially, you know, I always like to keep in the back of my mind that, you know, they're not racing tomorrow, and they're just as long as everything's in the right place physically, you know, they look like they're going to grow into a nice horse. You'd be amazed at what you can find for the money if you've got an eye, or if you've got someone to help you, like Gary, that can identify horses like that. Even if you were to go back through Gary's better horses, you know, like Gold Trail, for example. You know, he looked like a baby as a 2-year-old. He looked like a foal, but, you know, in turn, he had that class and longevity to go on and do what he did. And he ended up being one of his better race horses. So I don't necessarily look for the big, strong Hulk in that, because that's where you can find your bargains. That's where you can find your good buys at the right money.
Yeah. What about from an owner's perspective? If I bought a horse with you, what are the running costs? So am I paying for vet fees? Am I paying every time the horse attends the races? Am I paying for nominations? Graham, I'll start with you.
Yep. Well, this is where we differ a little bit from most syndicators, because we have a set fee. We have a set monthly fee per 5%, or 10% or 2.5%, whatever they buy. It's worked out on a 5% rate, which is $264. Now, we've worked that out over the life of the horse, and we work it out that the average career is going to be about 4 to 5 years, and there's times when they're spelling that the costs will be a lot lower than that, but when they're racing, they can be a lot higher than that, but it all works out in the wash. we sorry, I just lost my line of thought, train of thought there. What's included in that $264 is everything. So vet fees, trials, transport, everything except if there was to be a major operation. If for example, we had a problem with one of the horses and the vet said, look, this is going to be a $10,000 operation, we'd go out to the owners and ask them whether they'd be prepared to pay for that, or should we retire the horse. That's just the way it is. And the only other thing is nominations for stakes races. But generally, we have been in that boat, and we have never had an owner say, no, I don't want to send our horse to a Group 2 race because it's going to cost me $100 for my 5% share or something like that. So that's a problem that people like to have. But everything else is included. And most of the people that, well, in fact, all the people, I've never heard one of our owners complain about it. And in fact, the opposite, that's the thing they like about it. They know exactly what they're up for every month.
Adrian, do you run yours a little bit differently?
Yeah, we do. I don't, and again, as I've said, alluded to earlier, there's a number of great ways that people sort of run their companies, and we're fortunate enough to have a lot of good syndicators around. But I prefer to have owners build directly. That way, it's costs are very transparent. They know exactly what they're paying for. You know, I do encourage that they budget. Let's say if we're basing it on a 5% share, I'd encourage them to budget $50 a week over the course of the year, which equates to, I think, $50,000, $52,000 a year, which is quite exaggerated. But essentially, when they're in the paddock on the basis of a 5% share, it's going to cost you around $60, $65. When they're in work, you're looking at around $220, $230, $250, depending on what the horses do. So I'm always there to assist. Of course, that's my job. You know, if people have a question about billing or whatever. But at the end of the day, in terms of owners receiving their invoices, I'd much prefer that it comes from the trainer or the speller directly. That way, they just know that I'm not putting my buck or two on top every day, or that, you know, there's no hidden cost or charges. It's just there. You know, if the horse is spelled for that month, then they're going to get a bill for spelling that month, you know. So it's, again, people may prefer one to the other. Generally, in that regard, they won't receive more than a couple of invoices a month. And particularly horses in that, you know, that point where they're yearlings, 2-year-olds, and even 3-year-olds, they do tend to spend a lot of time in the paddock. It's a given, you know, especially 2-year-olds are in for a few weeks, then they're out for 6 weeks, you know. So whilst I encourage people to budget a certain number every week or every month, I have my owners build directly from the trainer or from the speller. They'll receive an itemized bill for absolutely everything, whether they've been wormed or shoed or they've been given a BCA paste or whatever it is. It's all on their bill, and they'll pay the trainer or the speller directly. And of course, I'm always there to help, you know, in case they've got a question, because over the space of doing this for 12 years, there's really not anything I haven't run into, you know. And as Graham alluded to, there are those extra costs though. So, you know, let's say a horse needed a tieback operation, and they can be quite common, and it's going to cost $3,000. Well, that's a cost that you wouldn't include in your budget, because that's not considered an ordinary cost. So that's how we run it. Yep,
that makes sense. What about when a horse finishes its career? Say it's a gelding, for example, 6-year-old. Is there But do you follow the horse's career after that? Do you make sure it goes to a good home? Do you send it to a tried horse's sale? Is there anything in particular you do? Adrian, I'll start with you.
From day one, and as I said, we've been doing this from 2008, I think. There has never been a horse we haven't found a home for. Okay, so generally fillies will go on to stud. That's kind of the easy one. There's a lot more options for geldings than people think. Even if it's not like, yes, at the end of their career, we've got contacts with equestrian, pony club, the police force. There's always a home for them. If they still love their racing, but they've taken a step back and they're not up to the grade here, then we'll put them through a sale, like say the English digital sale, and they usually go to a home at say North Queensland or country New South Wales. I've also got a good agent that I've used for a number of years, and I know the trainers he sells horses to. I know they look after them. So, I'm glad you asked this, because there are a lot of uneducated people out there that don't know the lengths we go to find these horses homes. And sometimes you can find them a home in a day. Sometimes it takes a few weeks, but generally the owners are more than happy to pay an extra $30 or $40 for each share in spelling fees until such time we find a home. A lot of the time I'll even take that cost on myself. There have been many times in the past where I've taken costs like transport on so that I can get that horse to its new home. Vet costs prior to sending it out to make sure everything's okay. And I find that owners appreciate that anyway. It's certainly something that is reciprocated, in that the owner will come back feeling comfortable that you're doing everything you can, and you will eventually find a good home for that horse once they finish racing. So there's plenty of options out there for them.
Exactly right. Graham, of course, you have a lot more fillies, and you haven't been up and running as long as Adrian. But any horses that you have had retire, or even as an owner that you've had retire in the past, would you be able to tell us what's happened there, and how do you run through Gold Edge?
Yeah, sure. Well, that's the main reason we just buy fillies. So just makes it easier when they're post-race that you sell them as a broodmare, and which is what we've just done with Nikki's Gold. We have had one that we did have to retire. She never got to the races, and she's back in the farm that we bought her off. We just gave it to the lady that bred her. So, and we keep tabs with her. We see her often at the sales and just find out, and she's still going. She's going well, but she had some issues with her knee. She was never going to make a racehorse, so we gave it back to the farm. But it is, I agree with Adrian. It's very important that you rehome them as well as you can. And we just found with fillies, it's a no-brainer. It's easy to do.
Yeah. What we might do now is, of course, Graham, you've got 3 horses listed on our site, all of which have been sold. But in case we do have any owners of these horses watching, I will put them up just so that you could give us a little run through about how they're going into their preparations, whether they're spelling, when they might be expecting to run. Mm-hmm. Just sort of talk about them. Same with you, Adrian. You've got 3 horses here listed with us that are still all for sale. So we'll go through them. So I'll just share my screen here. Okay, so first one is Graham's Shooting to Win by Royal Tower filly.
Yep. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, sure can.
Yep, sorry. Yeah, beautiful little filly, this one. This is the one this is the last one we sold of the 3. We finished selling her last week. Very precocious, very frisky little filly. Granddaughter of a very, very good horse in Regal Chamber. Ran 3rd in the Golden Slipper. So we love the family. the page is just littered with black type. Gary loved her from the first time he saw her. He just loved her. Said she was very athletic. So she ticked all the boxes. And I'm sure Shooting to Win was a sire we weren't sure of, but since we've had him, since we've had her, Shooting to Win's just grown another leg as a sire. It's got that really good horse in Melbourne called Mystery Shot. It's had a couple of black types, a 2-year-old, extra time, and of course, full brother to Deep Field. So, and probably a better racehorse than Deep Field. Certainly achieved more on the racetrack than Deep Field, and you know, Deep Field setting the world on fire at the moment. So we've got the same blood. Love the mare's family, and Gary loved it, and a real athlete. So that's why we bought her.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
What about your Rubik filly that you've got here?
Rubik filly, yeah. Now, when we went to the sale, we were really keen to buy a Rubik. We looked at quite a few, and this is the one we thought was the best one at the sale. And it's got a half called Mayanne. Now, Mayanne is in Tony McAvoy's stable. It's had an injury, but before that, it had 2 races. It absolutely cleaned up a field in its first race at Morfettville, and they took it over to Moonee Valley, and it ran second in a listed race. So the family that ticked that part for us. Lovely athletic filly once again. Gary's, it's so, I must say as well that both the Rubik and the Shooting to Win have had a preparation with Gary. He's very happy with the way they went. They're back out in the paddock at the moment, but I think they're due to come into his stable probably in the next week or so. So we'll get them back in, and hopefully they might go on to be early running 2-year-olds.
Yes, hopefully. She's a beautiful looker.
Yeah.
So I can get this one up here. I can't reach it. Your Piero filly anyway, so we'll talk about her.
Yep.
How's she travelling along?
The Piero we bought a little bit later. We actually bought her at the Premier sale down in Melbourne. So she she's broken in, but she hasn't come into Gary's for a prep yet, or even any pre-training. But once again, we think that's going to happen very soon. She's like, we bought a filly last year called Midnight Fling, a Nakoni, Nicky's Fling, a Nakoni out of the mare Midnight Fling. Gary's description of this one is very much like his description at the time with that one, with Nicky's Fling. And that was that the frame's there, but she hasn't grown into it yet. A little bit like what Adrian was alluding to before. And he said that about this one as well. Now, if this one turns out like Nicky's Fling has, she'll be a world beater, because Nicky's Fling is just going gangbusters. She's had 2 races. She's won as a 2-year-old. All our horses have won as 2-year-olds, actually. But Nicky's Fling, we think, might reward us pretty soon. She's back in at Gary's, probably ready to trial in about 3 weeks. But it's just interesting that he said the same thing about this Piero, that they're just not ready yet, which is probably why we bought them at the price we got them for.
Yeah, she's certainly a standout type there. I love the look of her.
Yeah, and she's out of, Piero, as we know, Piero's, you know, probably the most exciting young sire in the country, and out of a black type mare. So, you know, there's plenty in the pedigree, and there's plenty in the looks.
Adrian, I'll throw to you now for your Capitalist by Letitia Colt.
Yeah, well, we actually, I like the Capitalist. It's actually the second one I've bought. this year. The first one we sold pretty quickly. You know, I think we ended up buying 10 this year. I don't like to buy much more than that, because I like to keep a hands-on everything. But I'm not usually one to go out and buy a couple by the same stallion. But this fellow was a bit hard to ignore. Gary actually brought my attention to this colt. He's actually a half to striker, who was a Group 3 winner. He ran third in the Galaxy. I think he ran third in the Golden Rose too. He's also a half to Exceed and Exalt, who was stakes placed. Seeking Attention, who was stakes placed. And Seeking Attention is the dam of Diodoro, who Gary trains and has won 4 in town. So, I mean, you can see there as a type, he's just an absolute cracker, you know. Out of a Woodman mare. He ticks all the boxes. I mean, the mare's done a job, and he was just at that sale, he was going through a funny point in terms of his growing. He was really coming up from behind, and he looked a bit awkward, but you could kind of tell that, you know, once you give him a few months out in the paddock, that he's going to make a magnificent animal. And he's actually come through the stable now. And look, Gary likes him so much that I believe he's put one of Ray Thomas's mates into the horse. So he's really got a big opinion of this one. There's only 20% left in him. So look, he's just really ticking all the boxes at the moment. He'll come back into the stable in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, it's certainly one that I think anyone watching this does need to register their interest for this horse. Looks an absolute cracking type and a spitting image of his dad. We'll have a look here at your Zoustar by Without Saying colt.
He was one of these horses that, as I alluded to earlier, was one of these horses that was just really foalish, behind, looked like a real baby at the sale. I thought that, and in that video you're looking at there, that's another horse we sold early on, an American Pharaoh, but he's getting broken in with it there in that video. But this fellow, I just thought he was in the wrong sale, you know, being in the January Magic Millions, because, you know, we gave him 4 months out before breaking him in, and he was just a different horse. We paid 120,000 plus GST for him. He's from the family of Reduced Choice, Platinum Scissors, Rubik. So he's got the page, and just as a type, I would say he's real typical of what I've seen of a lot of the Zoustars. And I don't think Zoustar needs any introduction. You know, he's doing a fantastic job at stud, and I really like this fellow. He reminds me a lot of another Zoustar we bought a couple of years ago, and he's probably the unluckiest maiden in Sydney running around at the moment. But his name's Zoonate, and he really reminds me a lot of him. Although this fellow just has a better pedigree behind him. So nice horse.
Certainly positive signs there. And last one we'll have a look at here is your Sebring by Dolorosa filly.
Look, I love the Sebrings. I've had a lot of luck with them. I've been lucky enough to have bought and raced horses like Sebring Son, who was a stakes winner, ran third in the Golden Rose, and he's standing at stud now. We recently retired Bringer Gem, who was a city winner by Sebring. We also recently retired Sebring Express, who won a couple at 2. I love the stallion. He throws tough, sound horses. This one was just a real neat, nice walking type. She went through the classic sale. The mare by Show a Heart was a winner at 2. She's a half sister to Bring Me the Maid, who ran third in a Golden Slipper. And the Grand Dam made for me, Gary actually trained. So Gary knows the family pretty well. So as I said, I've just had a lot of luck with these Sebrings. She's just a really nice type. She's not too big. She's not too small. She's got everything in the right place. She's already come through the stable and she did everything right. So we're looking forward to seeing her back in a few weeks' time.
Certainly a cheap buy there, $2,950 for 2.5%. So anyone wanting to get involved, please register your interest. Is there anything you'd like to finish off on, guys?
Only to say, Justin, that we try, apart from wanting to have successful horses for our owners and giving them days out, we try and concentrate a bit on the social side. So we try and make it fun for our owners. We get them all out to the races. We take them every year. We go to the Scone Carnival. That's just getting bigger and bigger. Started off with about 10 joining us, and this year we had to cancel due to the COVID-19, but we had 44 people, I think, booked in to come, and we've booked a heap of rooms again next week. We were going to put a function on at the local hotel with a band. So we try and make it a real experience. Not just paying and watching your horse and seeing them run around in the bush where they can't get there. Hopefully all our horses run around in the metro or provincial areas, and we always get a lot of the owners wanting tickets and joining us. So, and we've formed a lot of friendships. We actually, we got a group came in, they came off Bloodstock, I think, bloodstock.com, and they bought, I think 5 of them bought a 5% share in one of our horses. The next year, their wives got involved, formed a little syndicate and bought 5%, and since then it's sort of been tit for tat. And we've got that friendly with them. We, one of the fellows invited us along to his 60th birthday last year. So it's just a real experience that we try and bring to our owners.
Yeah, certainly the social aspect of syndication is a huge part, and I know it's why a lot of people join up to sort of not just to see the horse, but to go to these functions and get involved and meet other people who are either interested in racing or wanting to learn about racing. Adrian, I'll finish off with you.
Oh, if any of them are watching, I just want to thank my owners, really. You know, I've been lucky enough to have a lot of them that have been with me for over 10 years now, which I think says something about what we do. A lot of them become good friends, but without their support, I don't think any of us here, be it myself, Graham, or anyone else in our business, we couldn't do it without our owners. You know, so every opportunity I get to thank them, and for that matter, anyone involved in racing with anyone, if it wasn't for them, none of us would be here. You know, so it's a good thing to see that continued support come through, and hopefully, whoever's watching, if you're an owner, gee, I hope you win many, many, many races, because it's only going to bring you back to people like us. So, yeah, I just like to thank everyone, especially our owners, though.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this is why we do this type of webinar, to make sure that anyone who's watching who might be even interested in getting involved in horse ownership, they can learn a little bit more, and it's not just over email or over a Facebook video. They can interact live and actually listen to like you two, the two most important people in racing, syndicators. Just talk about your horses and talk about what goes on within your syndication. It's a really crucial thing that needs to get out there more often for those people wanting to get involved into horses.
Yeah, and they should know that they don't need to spend a lot of money. You really don't. You know, our biggest success stories have come from horses we bought for $40,000 and $50,000. You know, we've been fortunate enough to have, you know, runners in the Golden Slipper, win a couple of races at the Magic Millions, and all with horses that have cost 40, 45 and 50,000. So you just need to have a go. You just need to have a crack and go in, not expecting the world, just expecting to have some fun, meet some people, and if you win a race or two, it's a bonus, and hopefully it goes way beyond that. But that's the important thing, having a go, enjoying yourself. And look, if you try long enough, and I've got people that have, I can tell you now that a handful of let's say for argument's sake, Tessa Shadow, a handful of them are first-time owners. They went in expecting nothing, and I always say that to people: don't go in expecting the world. We'd all love a Cox Plate winner, or a horse to win the Magic Millions, but if you go in with realistic expectations, don't let the person on the other line of the phone sell you a load of rubbish. Just go in expecting to learn, have fun, get involved, and you just never know what will come of it.
Yep, spot on. What a great note to finish off on. I'd just like to thank you two for joining me. It's been great getting to know a bit more about your syndications and the differences between you guys. And of course, both of you are with Gary Portelli, and good to see that those horses you have listed with our site have been sold and are going along well in their work.
Thanks, Justin. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Not a problem, boys.